Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Mechanical Anime Reviews podcast. I am Scott, and I come from the blog Mechanical Anime Reviews. Today, we will be discussing why I like retro anime. I talked a little bit about that in my first episode, but I wanted to go a little more in depth today. And first, we'll be starting out with defining what I think is retro. To me, as an older anime fan, considering that most fans only last 2 years, I consider anything late 90s and below to be retro. That's when the advent of animation went from hand painted and cell animation to digital. Some people have talked about how like early 2000s to mid 2000s had a different digital style, but I think that still fits under the compass, but that may be just because I'm too old now. Now, before we get too far, this is not a new anime hating podcast. If you followed me on my blog for a long time, I've still watched a lot of anime. I watch at least like 10 anime shows a season. I tried my best to keep up with all the new kind of trends that could appear, and I still enjoy a lot of creative projects. There's still a lot of creative projects. So what do I like about new anime? Well, it could be more consistently good because digital animation has allowed for a lot of very interesting colors and animation to be a lot more fluid because you can see it on a computer screen. New anime is generally more clean, more consistent. It makes for a very good experimentation ground for a lot of different styles and colors because you can have that capability like right at your fingertips if you want it. And like people still work really hard for good animation. You can look on the Sakuga blog. You can look on Get the Mecha's different Twitter things that he goes through, like going through all the different creators of episodes that he watches. It's a lot of fun. One modern example that I could think of for like modern anime having great animation is one example that I could tell you about myself is there was a special for Chihaya Furu's season 3 opening where the animators just worked hard just show Chihaya's hand swipe motion, and you can see like all the frames in the packet before they put it on the computer, and like it's amazing. And I'm sure I can go on and on about all the great things that digital animation in 2021 has to offer. But we're here for older anime, right? So where does that differ? To me, digital animation is like a magnifying glass for quality in anime. It is really easy to tell what is a bad show and what is a good show. Like a bad show, you can tell when people did not put in a lot of effort into every single frame or the animation or the art style. And then you can see like all the great things from a great show. You can see it all the different art styles, all the different colors that they're going to use, all the different animation styles and everything. It's a lot easier to experiment now. Compared to that, older animation has like a higher floor of effort that they have to put in. We're talking about like hand painted cells and lining up every single cell to a 16mm to 32mm camera and then lining that up. Can you imagine doing that for every single frame of an anime? That's insane. Like, older anime is a miracle that it even exists. I mean, let's talk about some of the imperfections from older anime. Yeah, like the shaky frames. Like sometimes you notice a title frame and it shakes, and it's kind of like, wow, they didn't line that up correctly. Or it's like the film grain that you can see from the camera from when it's in motion. Or you can talk about like the lower frame counts, the limited animation and movement, the lacking of matching lip flaps sometimes, stock footage, the reused animation sequences, or the lack of colors. Like for Akira, they had to invent new paints to put on their cells because there's a limited amount at that time. All those imperfections are why I love older anime so much. All those imperfections are made from humans, and I love that. I love knowing that humans have created everything. And what is so astonishing about that is that so many legendary stories come from these limited animation and older cell animation products. Like so many iconic things like Char Aznavour would not be a thing without appearing in 1979. Within those limits of cell animation comes a lot of innovation and directional styles which stand out a lot more. And when there is limited animation, a lot of the writing and character voices all make up for it in like the best way possible. And I do admit that there's some level of forgiveness for cell animation because of the limits at that time, of the limits of what they can do. So, like, you can say, well, this was older, and people can forgive those errors, which is fine because that's the truth. There is a great difference in limited animation from cell animation to, let's say, the motion comic Way of House Husband, which looked cheap, and a lot of people were put off by it because it looked cheap in digital animation. And before we end, I feel like we should at least talk about when older anime looked really good. We could talk like the mid 80s onward during Japan's bubble economy where the standard of animation just increased. Even for TV anime. Like there's a huge difference between the way Gundam 0079 looks and the way Zeta Gundam looks because Zeta Gundam does have limited animation, but there's a lot more visually pleasing scenes of all these mecha with different jets appearing in different legs and arms and body and everything. Like it's stunning how great it looks. And I have the DVD copy. I don't have the Blu-ray copy, which looked even better, but it's astonishing. There's a lot of 80s OVAs and movies which have the most beautiful animation ever. I'm talking about like Akira and a few other things like Megazone 2-3, which looked phenomenal to me. And that quality generally lowers as you go into the 90s, but there's still a lot of great looking cell animation in the 90s as well. TV shows and OVAs. And let's just say that there are some bad looking cell animation shows as well. There's some that didn't go like to the bottom of the roof of effort to make it at least good. Those are shows like Charged Man Ken. And you can learn how bad a show like that is from Kenny Lauderdale's YouTube channel. To sum up my opinions on cell animation, I really love the imperfections in it because it's so exciting to actually see it all and say a human hand painted this. It can talk about the bubble era OVAs and anime films where a human made this and it looks incredible. They hand painted this. How did they do that? Both of those impressions are what I think of retro anime. Besides, digital animation has some experimental things too, like Mob Psycho is absolutely wonderful. So is Kiyosiga, if you haven't checked that out. And there's a lot of other examples too, so there is a reason to watch cell animated anime and digital animated anime. And with that, it's time to conclude this episode. So I am Scott from MechanicalAnimeReviews.com or Mech Anime Review on Twitter. I also have another blog called Scott's Muse where you can hear some of my trumpet songs. You can listen to one of those songs on the outro of this podcast. You might remember Fly Me to the Moon from certain other anime. And finally, thank you for listening today.